I was talking to somebody the other day about karma. And, you know, it's one of those weird things when you're talking to somebody about, first of all, religion, because people get a little, understandably so. There's been a lot of problems in the world that have been blamed on religion, right? So, talking about, like, okay, so what is this reincarnation business? And if there is such a thing as reincarnation, how is it decided, right? Like, is it just randomized? Like, you just get into a slot machine and just roll it, and like, all right, you're a rat this life. Like, what does that mean? Like, reincarnation. And then, if you suffer any kind of, bad luck, what people will call it, whatever. Like, right, you get abused, you get beaten, you get you lose a limb, whatever happens, right? Something that's like, you know, very drastic. Let's talk about something drastic as opposed to something, because there's minor things, but and then you're like, okay, so if my dad beat me, like, not like the little bit of slapping around. I'm talking about like somebody was like beaten, like really, like, you know, whooping that, and not in a funny way. I know we laugh, but it's not funny. But some people really get, we're like teenage girls, we laugh at uncomfortable things. But like, you know, you're getting your mic's on, right? Let me just double check before we get too far into it.
Yep,
circle. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yep. So, yeah, mine's on. You have that, and then it's like, okay, so you believe, like, what does that mean? If I was beaten bloody, right? Does that mean that I beat, like what I was talking about was that, like, in theory, something similar to, you did something like that in a past life. That's our theory, right? That's karma. Karma is, there's a rhyme and reason to it. You did something at some point in a previous life.
Action and reaction.
Action and reaction, which is a scientific principle also, just while we're here. But that's also difficult, because then you have to think like, oh, so like I did that to someone, and that's why. And then it's almost, in a way, especially depending on how severe or whatever it was you experienced, it can be like, well, why would I want to accept that as the truth? That means that I would
never do that.
Right, I would never do that. Like, well, no, now you wouldn't. And maybe what you were saying, which clarifies it even more for me, and this is what happens when you actually read all the books you're supposed to read, because I'm still catching up. But
I'm not anywhere near where I need to be.
But like, the more we study, first of all, the more I feel like I'm starting to actually have some answers. Because sometimes when you get in these conversations, people ask you a question, and you're like, I know the general principle, but I can't like explain it logically to someone, even though I know there's a logical explanation. And that's the most frustrating thing for me when that happens, is I'm like, dang, like, if I just read more, I would be able to give you a logical answer. Because sometimes you're reading, like, Prabhupada, he's talking to a scientist, and they come at him with something, and he just goes, yes, except, and you're like, oh my God, like, it's just so clear and simple, and like, is that running out? I was worried that might happen. I'll just start taking notes up here. Or you can even take the notes on here if you want. You want to just take the notes? I think you might be a better note taker. Let me just do this.
Sure.
Hold on.
Here. We're trying to be more organized.
Yeah, trying is the operative word. Okay. Just a new note.
Something you struggle with. I struggle with.
How do you make a new note? Why is this always so complicated, man? Notes.
Put on my red.
Give me a new one, you bastard. Can we get... Sure. I just want a new note. Could you just do that, maybe? Damn. Let's just do Hans and I. There we go.
Something more.
Something more. I'm just trying to get somewhere where I can actually... Okay, the note just automatically happens over here.
We can make this episode 2.
This is episode 3.
To episode of
3.
Something more?
Something more. Because the first one we did, we didn't call it that.
Episode 3 of Something More.
What
this is our actual proper podcasting section. We're doing it right now.
Right now.
Right now. We have our reading. And now that we've gotten some reading under our belt, we will try to do more.
We have a little bit more ability to actually have an intelligent discussion about some of these things.
We don't sound like apes beating our chest and scratching our balls.
Yeah. We sound like apes eating a banana. It's a little bit better. So, what are we talking about? So, karma, reaction, action. So, basically, yes, it can be a little hard to stomach, especially the more issues you've had in your life. It's like, really? Like, I did that to someone, right? But then what you said, which I think made it even a little more clear, was you were saying that it's not necessarily that you did the exact, which I kind of knew, and I think I kind of prefaced it with like, It's not necessarily to the T exactly the same, but something similar, or something that like kind of like how we have crime and punishment. Like you do something, you get arrested by the government, you have to do the time, you have to serve the punishment, you have to do the community service. There's different punishments for different types of things. But what you said was that at some point, you in some body or another put another living entity into that same frame of mind that act then put you. So it may not be identical. Maybe you didn't beat someone bloody. Maybe you made them terrified in some other way. And because of that made you feel helpless and scared, that was the karma to feel, that would make you feel helpless. Because we're all a little different. Some things may not affect us the same way. So it doesn't necessarily mean it was like identical, like, okay, well, he punched me 3 times and then kneed me in the stomach, so that's what I did. No, that's a little too,
that's the literal, like, action and reaction, taking it on the surface level.
Right,
it's
but
deeper than that.
In general, you did something along those lines, something similar in an emotional / like, spiritual or whatever way to another living entity.
Yeah.
There goes the cloud. Hopefully it doesn't get too dark in this. Maybe I should have turned on the lights. Anyway, I'm sure it'll be fine. I might just change the color grading a bit. So I think that is one of the hardest things to grasp. If you're learning this, and then someone tells you that, especially if you've dealt with things, it's kind of like, whoa. But then I realized, this is something that I realized that I thought was, that I don't know, I mean, I read it somewhere, I'm sure, or I just like came to me like based on like putting pieces together, was that our other option, if we don't want to believe that we did something to incur that reaction at some point in time, our other option is that it happened just because we're unlucky. Because it just randomly happened. Yeah. It's random. You just get screwed sometimes. And to me, I think that feels more hopeless.
It does.
Because like at least if this thing, now again, I'm not talking, I know people have dealt with, doesn't mean that you, that's the other thing too, is like, okay, well then how would you ever have, this is a question that comes up sometimes. How do we then have sympathy for someone if they're going through something rough or tragic if we think, well, that's just their karma? Right? Because then it comes into like, well, if they were Hitler in their last life and they're doing some nonsense now, yeah, they deserve that nonsense. Because you know what they did? They murdered tons of people. They allowed tons of people to be experimented on. So why would you have compassion or sympathy or empathy for somebody who deserves what they're getting? Are you getting that, or do you want me to do it?
No, I got it. I was looking up database here so I can do some quick on-the-spot searches. So you're asking how... Okay. I guess before you continue, if you don't mind, let me sum up what I'm hearing. That it's hard for people to stomach sometimes the idea of karma and how something that happened in a previous life that we don't necessarily remember is now causing us to experience something we're now going through, whether it's good or bad. Right. And if we believe that, then that means all the suffering we see in the world, oh yeah, that's their karma. They deserve it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So then what you're, I guess the question that I'm hearing being brought out or wanting to get touched on is how to have compassion for people, even though understanding that they're suffering this karma.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good question. But the one thing I want to just because I think I kind of quickly jumped around, I do think that counterpoint of the other option is that it's very, very random and we just got unlucky or whatever, however you'd say it, is a very unfortunate, what am I trying to say here? It makes it a little bit, to me, if you have those two options, which is reality what options we have, right? It's either random as all get out, or there's a reason for it. Karma, the rules of the universe, dharma, whatever you want to call it, right? There's a reason why we're experiencing this. And while, obviously we know from experience that this is not in our control fully, it does mean that our reactions and the way we treat people in this life can help us get out of, either get better karma, right? If you just try to be a decent human being and be nice to everybody, you can maybe just get better karma, and then you come back and maybe a better life. The problem with that cycle is that then you get good karma, you get a better life, better life, better life. And what happens when you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth and you become a jerkwad because you just never had to deal with anything hard in your life, and then you get some bad karma, and then you're back in the cycle. And what we're talking about here is not how to have a perfect life this life. It's not how to live, well, I mean, it is how to live free of pain and suffering, and like Radha Swami says, we're all seeking pleasure, everything. Every living entity is seeking pleasure, right? It is about that. But more than that, it's about getting out of the cycle, because real pleasure is not having to come back for this, right? Sure. So we're coming back to this repeatedly. Even if we have a couple decent lives, even in a really good life, you experience some tragedy. You experience something that at some point in time, people close to you die at some point. Like, there's things that happen that are not great, even if you're living a fairly charmed life for the most part. So the goal is to not have to keep doing this cycle. And that's what the science of reincarnation and the science of self-realization and all of these books, this science of Vedic philosophy, of bhakti yoga, is all about us learning to transcend the cycle as opposed to staying in it. You could stay in it if you want to, and the law of karma could still help you try to live a better life. The problem is, will you remember next life? And in next life, you might get really good at getting really good reactions in this life. Like, you might nail it real, like get it really fine tuned, and next life you might live a hell of a great life. But what happens the next one, and the next one, and the next one? Because nothing is permanent in this creation. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent, so we'll pull it back. But then you were talking about how to have compassion.
Yes, I will. So we'll talk about some of the things I wanted to talk about that you had mentioned was one of them earlier on, reading scripture and how reading better equips you to answer questions.
Yeah.
And there was then there was compassion.
Yeah.
How to have compassion for people suffering through their karma. And then also another thing you had said, pleasure, right? We're all seeking pleasure.
Yep.
And then I had a question here that I think we could maybe explore, which is, what is real pleasure? We all seek pleasure, but what really is it that actually pleasure brings us, right? We all want that pleasure, but what are we really seeking? What is
love.
The underlying thing? It's,
love.
Yeah.
Some sort of loving interaction. It doesn't have to be physical. It doesn't have to be whatever.
So going back to, I guess one thing I wanted to preface, there is a quote here. Let me see if I can look it up. By Prabhupada.
Good person to quote.
Yep.
Good person to quote. There's actually some stuff in this book that I'd love to read on this context. Actually, let me see if I can find like a short bit, because the whole thing is amazing. But
so, this is a television interview, and I love this. Okay. Because another thing you had said was you called this a science.
Yes.
And that's one thing I think a lot of people tend to easily dismiss with, the Hare Krishnas. Not maybe so much from our generation, but I know the past, excuse me, there's a tendency for people to think, oh, the Hare Krishnas are them crazy hippie people that dance around, they eat good food, and they're a little off the wall.
Yeah.
And it is because of that. It's very interesting because it almost can turn off people from exploring beyond the surface level.
Yes.
Some people appreciate it. Wow, yeah, they're really nice. They're very happy people. They give good food, and they just seem really happy. But the thing is, the reason we seem happy, the reason we have the good food, the reason we do all these things and we jump around, it's not just this, like, hypermanic cult. Like, the reason that we're able, for the most part, as to have this kind of interaction is because we practice on, regularly to try to transcend the social and, like, societal norms, right? Don't talk about this because it's uncomfortable. Don't talk about death. Don't talk about this.
Yeah.
But those are the things that are really what causes so much of the agitation in our world. So Prabhupada often says here, right? Religion without philosophy is sentiment, and philosophy without religion is mental speculation. They should be combined, philosophy and religion, then it will be perfect. And so this is one of the problems that you see in some religious practices, is there's a lot of sentimentalism, but there's no philosophy to back it up. And what that ends up creating is extremism. You know, whether it's Christian extremism, Muslim extremism, whatever, you know, those generally tend to be the two that are most common in the world today. But the extremism is there because there's no philosophy to back it up. Therefore, they're very religious beliefs and everything. It's all tied to emotion. So if you're telling me that I'm wrong, or you don't accept Jesus, and he's not, you know, if you don't accept that he's the only way, then they somehow feel like maybe I'm believing in the wrong thing. And because it's all tied to emotion and sentiment, and it's not tied to logic, then it breeds this extremism. So that's one of the beautiful things about these books is Prabhupada presents the religious aspect, but also the philosophical aspect. And it answers some of the deeper questions that maybe many people don't actually never even like realize there are potential answers out there for. It's not to say that this is the only answer, but it definitely offers some answers. So then going into reading scripture, Prabhupada, the other day I was listening to a lecture and he was saying, if you can't read, you can't do anything, just chant Hare Krishna. Chant the Mahamantra, do the mantra meditation. That will be enough. But he said, reading is how, and I'm paraphrasing, reading allows you to have a grasp of the philosophy, so that when you're out in the environment of preaching, someone asks you a question, someone questions your belief. You may believe it 100%, but how are you going to how can you convince the other person that your beliefs are actually logically sound? Because if they think you're just based on sentimentality, what are they going to do? They're going to dismiss you.
Well, I would argue that it's not even so much about convincing, because that word has a negative connotation to it.
Presenting. Maybe.
Being able to present it in a way that they can at least understand it, and in a way that you're properly, because, you know, whether or not they want to buy into it is up to them. But if you can't present it properly, you're not even letting them know really what you believe.
You're doing them a
You're not even in a position to say, well, this is what I believe, and explain it in a clear enough manner they can go, oh, okay, and then they can leave it or not, or whatever. But at least you've properly provided the service of sharing your knowledge and your belief and what has worked for you in your life with another human being, and then they do whatever they need to do with it. And I think that is where we, you know, the more we read, the more we become able to do that.
Well, you really, when you read things, whether it's something you agree with or something you disagree with, when you read something, it helps you to explore the logical possibilities in belief systems that are maybe not what you believe in. But it gives you a different way to think about things. And then you have the option, do I like that? Or do I not like that? I don't know. That doesn't jive with me.
We talked about this in the last one too. The same idea about how like some people will not want to buy into or even consider something they hear about, mainly because now it's one thing if like you examine it and you go, well, there's a few issues here, not issues based on what you want, but issues that logical issues. Something like that doesn't really make sense, and you can't find an answer. Okay, but what's interesting is sometimes people will be like, no. Purely based on like, they're like, well, I don't want to have to live piously. I don't want to have to give up, you know, this or that or the other thing. I don't want to have to, you know, whatever. Like, I want to focus on me my whole life. Whatever it is, there's some little thing they don't want to deal with. I don't want to give up that or that. And they seem to believe that that's part of their process. So if I study what they're, or even listen to what they're talking about, then I'm in danger of having to give that up, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to disregard it. Which is interesting to me, because to me, either you would study it for a few months or a year, whatever, you know, give it some time, think about it, talk to some people, you know, mull it over, and then decide, no, there's a few issues with that for me, like logically. Not sensually, not based on our sense gratification, sense enjoyment, but something that's like, oh, that actually doesn't work for me. Or you would, if you ended up giving it up, if that's an actual danger for you, the fact that you even feel like that is a possible danger for you probably means there's a little bit to it, that you're feeling some part of you is like, oh, there might be a little truth here. And then you're like, whoa, well, if there's truth there, then that means that might, oh, nope, push that, and I get it, because we're like, we don't want to change, we're creatures of comfort, right? And so, but the very fact that there's a possibility you might decide to give up some kind of sense pleasure or something that you're worried about giving up, some sort of gratification you're currently used to, if you are willing to do that down the road because of something that you heard or read or listened or whatever, some meditation you got into, if you're willing to give that up, is probably a good reason for it. Or, like I said, you won't. You'll decide that you're not going to give it up. So what's the danger of listening with open mind? The danger is you might find something that's so powerful to you that you're willing to give up stuff you never thought you'd be willing to give up. Or you're just going to leave it. So what's the, if you're willing to give that, you're not just going to be forced to give it up. It's not like at some point someone's going to pull out a gun and say, now that you've been here for 6 months, you got to give everything up. It's like, no, you're going to make that decision or you're not. So you have control. And it's interesting really how we'll hide from new stuff because we're a little worried about that.
Confirmation bias. It makes you, maybe you're worried about leaving your comfort zone.
100%.
What I got, that's a very interesting.
Some people are very open to hearing. I'm not talking about those people. Sure. I'm talking about the people that are a little more like, ooh. And we all have that a little bit.
Of course.
But it can really get away from us if we're not consciously deciding when to put that wall up and when we're just letting our mind put up the wall for us as a knee-jerk reaction.
Well, see, I think that this is something that we all struggle with regularly.
Yeah.
And this is where mindfulness meditation comes into play, because when you were just now talking about this, I said here, we bury our real questions for daily convenience. Meaning,
True.
You were just saying, what's the danger, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you really, really analyze it, there's not a danger at all. It's a win-win situation. You either hear something new,
right,
and say, that was interesting. I entertained that idea, but I'm going to let that idea go.
Yeah.
Or that idea changes your life for the better.
Yeah.
Either way, it's a win-win. You either don't change or you change.
Yeah.
It's not like anything bad is going to happen to you.
Right.
And that's where I thought of this. We bury our real questions. Those questions that you have tend to be, at least for me, when I'm alone, when I'm not distracted, though that's when my mind wanders and touches on those kinds of questions, like the real fundamental questions of your nature of existence, your relationships, not like the physical emotional relationships, but really your relationship with others and the world around you, this sense that everything is connected, right? And so meditation, that taking the time where we can be by ourselves so we can ask those questions. Because I think what happens is, maybe you're going about your day, you're in your car, you're driving to work, you start thinking about some of these deep questions, and it's it almost becomes uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so what do? Oh, you put on YouTube, you put on a radio station, now you're jamming out to your song. We're forgetting, we really try so hard to bury those questions, because that's where, in the Bhagavad Gita, this is the mind. This is not controlling your mind. When you don't control your mind, you can't control what you think about.
Yep.
And so when our mind is faced with the possibility of having to give up the sense gratification, it freaks out.
I mean,
and unless you're aware of that mechanism even going on, you're not even able to understand that that's an issue. Just like an alcoholic who's not willing to admit he's an alcoholic doesn't realize he has a problem.
Yep.
And it's no different, with controlling the mind.
100%. One thing I want to talk about, because obviously then it's okay, but what happens if that is the truth and then I fail at it sometimes? So I read this on our channel on Instagram last night, but I want to read this text 30 real quick on Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9. I'll kind of skim through it real fast. The translation: even if one commits the most abominable actions, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated. That brought on a question, which ended up with me reading the purport, because it's all that could sound like you're saying as long as you chant Hare Krishna a few times a day, if you're murdering people, it's totally good. Mm-hmm. No, it's not what he's saying. And I assumed that was not what was being said, so I went ahead and read the purport for some clarification. Mm-hmm. When a living entity is conditioned, he has two kinds of activities. One is conditional and the other is constitutional. As for protecting the body or abiding by the rules of society and state, certainly there are different activities, even for the devotees, in connection with the conditional life. And such activities are called conditional. because they're based on our conditioning, our material conditioning. Besides these, the living entity who is fully conscious of his spiritual nature and is engaged in Krishna consciousness or the devotional service of the Lord has activities which are called transcendental. Such activities are performed in his constitutional position, his eternal position, his spirit soul. And they are technically called devotional service. Now, in the conditioned state, sometimes devotional service and the conditional service in relation to the body will parallel one another. But then again, sometimes these activities become opposed to one another. As far as possible, a devotee is very cautious so that he does not do anything that could disrupt his wholesome condition. He knows that perfection in his activities depends on his progressive realization of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes, however, it may be seen that a person in Krishna consciousness commits some act which may be taken as most abominable socially or politically. But such a temporary fall down does not disqualify him. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that if a person falls down but is wholeheartedly engaged in the transcendental service of the Supreme Lord, the Lord, being situated within his heart, beautifies him and excuses him from that abomination. The material contamination is so strong that even a yogi, fully engaged in the service of the Lord, sometimes becomes ensnared. But Krishna consciousness is so strong that such an occasional fall down is at once rectified. Therefore, the process of devotional service is always a success. No one should deride a devotee for some accidental fall down from the ideal path, for as is explained in the next verse, such occasional fall downs will be stopped in due course, as soon as a devotee is completely situated in Krishna consciousness. So he's also obviously, that's not an excuse to then just like, well, I'll chant a few times and again, like, but he's talking about if you're really focused and occasionally you do something, whatever, you're having some weakness, you're having some issues.
Accidental too.
Right. Meaning that you let your mood, you let something happen that kind of drove you in one direction, and then you realize afterwards, like, oh my God, what did I do? And you start really trying to fix whatever it is, get better, get more fully grown.
Right. True repentance. You're really repentant for whatever sin it is. I think what I took from that was that it's a state of mind.
Yeah.
If your state of mind is, well, because I'm going to the temple and because I'm chanting and because I'm reading, it's okay if sometimes I, do whatever, some abominable action, because as long as I keep doing this, right, I'll be all right. That's not the state of consciousness. That is not the state of devotional service. Therefore, if you're not in that frame of mind, and you're not having this conscious attention, like intent to serve, you're not situated in this position.
Right.
Thereby, this is something that I think all religious organizations struggle with, because there's this sense, throughout the other major religions as well, that, just have faith and that is true, but you can't use it as an excuse.
No. And then I'm going to skip one of the paragraphs here because it'll get a bit long if I don't. But and it's good. But the end, when he wraps it up, he kind of talks about what you're just saying. The mark of a spot which may be seen on the moon does not become an impediment to the moonlight. Similarly, the accidental fall down of a devotee from the path of a saintly character does not make him abominable. On the other hand, one should not misunderstand that a devotee in his transcendental devotional service can act in all kinds of abominable ways. This verse only refers to an accident due to the strong power of material connections. Devotional service is more or less a declaration of war against the illusory energy. As long as one is not strong enough to fight the illusory energy, they may be accidental, kind of like losing a battle. There may be accidental fall downs, but still trying to win the war. But when one is strong enough, he is no longer subjected to such fall downs, as previously explained. No one should take advantage of this verse and commit nonsense and think that he is still a devotee. If he does not improve in his character by devotional service, then it is to be understood that he is not a high devotee. They also warn, and the one I skipped at the very end of it.
Which verse is this?
Text 30 of chapter 9.
Yeah, that's a really powerful...
they also warn, if one does not follow this rule and derides a devotee, if you're making fun or deriding another spirit soul devotee, whatever, for his accidental fall down, then he is disobeying the order of the Supreme Lord. So we have to be very careful not to, just because somebody did something wrong one time, hold it against them for the rest of their life. The only qualification of a devotee is to be unflinchingly and exclusively engaged in devotional service. Not to be worried about other people's devotional service. Hint, hint. for some of us that needed to hear that. That verse was really powerful, and so I wanted to share that, and it kind of tied into what we were talking about. I mean,
I love it. There's so much, God, so much wisdom in these.
That's amazing.
In these Vedic scriptures, it's. So
yes.
Coming back to compassion for people
Yes.
suffering from their karma.
Yes.
And then we
do
can
that.
talk about what.
Let's do that.
Then we can go more into maybe pleasure.
That works.
How do we have compassion for people who are suffering their karma? And, well...
You're still suffering, aren't you?
I think that... I think you can still have... Put it this way, right? You break your arm.
Yeah.
Because you were doing something dumb.
Right. That's a good point.
You
like a kid, when the kid breaks their arm,
does something really
doing something the
stupid,
parent told them not to do.
And then someday you grow up, right? Your kid breaks their arm, but they broke their arm, doing something dumb or whatever the case may be. The circumstances surrounding how or why you broke your arm does not mean that you experience the pain any less. And if you've broken your arm, you know exactly how it feels for the other person going through it. It doesn't matter if, I broke my arm on the job and you broke your arm being an idiot. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So whatever you did to get to the position you're at doesn't mean that you can't also empathize with that person, because you know what? Once upon a time, maybe in another previous life, if you really have an understanding and you accept the fact that there is reincarnation, and you probably have or probably will experience what that person is experiencing right now. So if you were experiencing that, how would you want other people to treat you? Would you want them to say, sorry, bro, it's your karma? Or would you want them to show some compassion? Another reason we show compassion is because the reason they're going through their karma is because they don't necessarily know that they're even stuck in the wheel of samsara, of birth and death.
They don't have
karma.
a memory of it. They don't know that's what's going on half the time.
So maybe one way that you can show compassion is by trying to educate them or give them some advice to try to promote that.
Give them the knowledge.
Give them the knowledge, because that is
that
really,
we've been
it's
lucky
like
enough
a
to have
starving man.
received that makes you feel a little less lost in all this.
Yeah.
Do you know how lost
Teach
it's so
someone
easy
to
to
fish
feel in
and
this
they
world?
can feed themselves for the rest of their life, right? Or you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day.
Give a man a garden and teach him how to tend to it, and he can feed himself forever, as opposed to giving him one meal.
Yeah.
But we've been given knowledge that helps us feel a little less lost. Mm-hmm. Even with that knowledge, we feel lost. I can't even imagine being born and to parents who, bless them. People's parents, just like, somebody lives on an island, they never experience anything, you just don't know. You just do what you do. But what's the point of life?
Yeah.
If you're born to somebody who doesn't even if they're maybe a little off, if they at least give you some direction, and then as you go through life, you're like, okay, I'm going to change this a little. But what is the direction that we get as kids? What do we learn? We have dysfunctional parents.
Broken
a lot of
homes,
times, broken homes.
Substance abuse,
we have, all that
poverty.
stuff. All kinds of abuse.
Yeah.
We deal with trauma. We have parents that it's not like they are aimless half the time. They don't know. Yeah. Or they're rudderless. They're just
a lot of times they're doing the best they can do.
They're always doing the best they can do. But that doesn't mean it's taking you anywhere you need to go.
Exactly.
No,
for
people
sure. But
they're doing. It's not like they're being evil per se.
Yeah.
We're not talking about somebody who's innately just being really horrible, but just people that just don't know. And then as a kid, you're getting older and older, and you're looking for where you're looking for your pleasure. Looking for your pleasure, compassion. Pleasure in sense gratification, drugs, alcohol, sex, all those different places.
Escapes from reality.
Escapes from your life, because you're if your parents don't know, right? If all they know is this life, but then the problem is at the end of this life, what happens? What do you end up regretting the most? Some people really focus on their relationship with their kids and stuff, and that at least is a step up, because at least you're dealing with interpersonal relationships. You're learning how to deal with people. that you're learning from them because they're open with you about their mistakes and stuff. But even then, if all they know is how to try to be the good person in this life, again, that cycle is still going to keep going. And then if you don't know about the cycle, you just think, okay, I'm going to be a good person, and then I die.
Trapped. Yeah.
Like, okay, but what's the point?
So you can get good grades, so you can get a good job, so you can work hard to make money, so
to
you
pay
can
bills.
Retire.
So you can retire for like 15 years when you're old and can't do as much, and then you die.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly. And that's how, like, and I think that's where a lot of people's anxieties come from, because deep down, it's staring us in the face. Dude. Hello, what is the point of life? Everything you're doing is not making a difference. It brings you
how does that not
pleasure.
feel hopeless,
It brings you
dude?
temporary pain, but, like, and then what we try to do is we try to bury the fact that, oh my God, this feels really hopeless.
Yeah.
And so we bury it in things that then end up making us feel even more hopeless.
Yep.
Oh man, my marriage is falling apart because I'm an alcoholic now, because I've been trying to cope with blah, blah, blah. This is where, I know we talked about it last time, the time and karma.
We didn't talk about that very much. We kind of got off the topic.
We did, we went on a little tangent, but we could talk about how the
Let's go back into it.
time...
I was talking about karma more than time in the beginning of this, and that's when we got into the compassion. But I think you touched on a good point for compassion.
To unlocking, or like unlocking some of the mysteries of karma is, it goes hand in hand with time. And if we try to understand what time is and really the effect it has on our everyday perception of reality.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard really to put into words, but like when you're in the zone and you're doing something, you really enjoy it, you're really good at it, whatever it is, and you're really in the zone and you're getting absorbed in it, that it feels like time is irrelevant, right? Time just flies by. You can spend hours doing it because you're so caught up into it. But then when you're doing something you don't like, or you're bored, or whatever the case is, the time really seems to drag. And I think the time dragging is because we are like, you're not present in the moment. You're anticipating the future, or you're thinking about the past.
Yep.
And it's the cycle we get in, but you can only ever be in the moment. That's what you always are in, is in the present moment. So whatever you're doing really is presently. You're presently doing this. And just because you did something a few minutes ago doesn't mean you have to keep doing that thing.
No. Not at all.
So when we give our own power to dwelling on the past or anticipating the future, we lose the ability to regulate the present. And when you're not able to regulate the present, then you end up doing things that are like emotional knee-jerk responses, right? And when you're doing mindless activities, that is how you're accruing karma. Because if you're truly being mindful about the activities you're doing, and that mindfulness is centered around Krishna, you're no longer accruing the karma, because whatever happens, good or bad, that's okay. I'm absorbed in this state of consciousness, which is Krishna consciousness. I'm focusing on how I can serve Krishna within the hearts of everyone around me, how I can serve Krishna in the world around me. I can serve Krishna in the temple. I can serve, or I can, there's so many different ways you can tie your everyday activities into Krishna.
Yeah.
Even if they're so-called mundane activities.
Well, that's something that we talk about too, Dharma, and the idea of like, part of the whole point of the Bhagavad Gita, because some people are like, okay, that's great. I actually saw Radhanath Swami talking with a guy, a short piece of an interview where the guy was saying like, it's a lot of work to put on robes, go live in a cave, do all these things. So why do we do it? And that's where he started talking about pleasure, how everybody's searching for pleasure. But a point that he may have gotten into later, because I didn't watch the whole interview, but a point that immediately sprung to my mind was the fact that as we've been learning in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, that's part of this whole thing, is that Arjuna's like, you know what? Rather than fight in this war, he's son of a king. He's supposed to protect the people. There's some very demoniac, like Hitler type people that want to be in charge, and he really should be getting rid of them. But he feels like, some of these people are my cousins. I know these people. That guy was my teacher at some point. I don't really want to fight these guys. right? Understandable sentiment. He's like, yeah, they may be kind of jerks, but like, really, I'm going to murder them and then what? So I can rule? It's not. Who cares? I'll just go live in a cave somewhere.
It's
and
like
Krishna
the
is literally
ultimate
telling him, like,
crisis.
right? And Krishna is telling him, no. That's not your job. Your job is not to go meditate upon Krishna or go meditate upon, like, that's not what we're preaching. That may work for some people. Some people may be more like, oh, you know what, I'm going to go and like, fine. But his point is, your job as a kshatriya, as a warrior, as a king, according to your nature, according to your training, is to protect the people. And if you just walk away from this, you're not protecting the people. You're not doing your duty. You're actually using spiritual life as an excuse to not do your duty. I may be slightly
having a fall down.
Like, forgive me if I'm a little miswording or whatever, because I'm not. But that's basically that's give or take a little bit what's going on in the Bhagavad Gita from a certain perspective, at least from my perspective. So, with that being going on, we're learning that it's not about going and meditating in a cave. It's not about sitting at home and just sitting on a yoga mat and just saying Om for the next 72 years. It's about figuring out how to make our everyday life, our actions, the way we treat other people, like you were saying, our action, our inaction, our reading, our speaking, all of it about Krishna. Does that mean that you're just always going to say no? But again, like, he's fighting for Krishna.
Krishna says that's the perfect yogi.
Right.
Because the yogi is not about the physical it's about the state of consciousness.
Right. That's the whole point of the physical and all the different chants and stuff, is to help you get your mind under control so you can control your mind and actually decide what you're doing, your mind and your body, and do what you want to do with this form that we have.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that, and then it's like, okay, so what? I just have to constantly be focusing on, but like that can include, like you were saying, me doing something for you because you are also a spirit soul. If it's really for you and not something that's secretly for me, trying. And again, if you make a little mistake or if it's a little bit selfish, then okay, well, next time maybe it'll be a little less selfish.
But at least acknowledge
you're trying it, you're acknowledging it, you're moving forward with it, you're attempting to make everything. And also, our life gets infinitely better the more we serve.
That's true.
There's a really quick thing I'll read from Sense of Self-Realization that has to do with serving. This is really good. Yeah, this is an amazing book. I've been really enjoying reading it. But there's something here about service. Okay, here we go. Actually, our position is that we are always rendering service to someone, either to our family, country, or society. If we have no one to serve, sometimes we keep a pet, a cat or a dog, and render service to it. And to me, just that part right there is like we all do that. We all talk about how we don't want to, I don't want to serve somebody. And then what do? We serve somebody.
And for the real curmudgeons who don't want to even have a pet, they just serve themselves.
Right, and that's what he says. All these factors prove that we are constitutionally meant to render service. Yet in spite of serving to the best of our ability, we are not satisfied. Nor is the person to whom we are rendering that service satisfied. On the material platform, everyone is frustrated. The reason for this is that the service being rendered is not properly directed. For example, if we want...
So there's some selfish motivation behind it.
Yeah, or you're addressing the wrong things, Okay. For example, it's like if you have a bad back and I keep giving you pain medication, but what you need is an adjustment so your back doesn't hurt so much anymore. It's like it may be slightly helpful, but not permanently. For example, if we want to render service to a tree, we must water the root. If we pour water on the leaves, branches, and twigs, there is very little benefit. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead is served, all other parts and parcels will be automatically satisfied. Consequently, all welfare activities, as well as service to society, family, and nation, are realized by serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He does say somewhere in here is that even if you're not serving someone, you serve yourself. Like the lowest end is like you're still providing service. You just decided to serve yourself. But normally when you really try to focus on something for yourself and make something really nice for yourself, it almost always ends up not going the way you want it to go. Whereas when you do things for other people and you're like, oh, let me do this and like this, if you're not attached to a result, because sometimes you do something for someone else expecting them to either thank you so much or do something for you in return or whatever. If you're really doing it for them to make them happy, or not even to make them happy, because that's another thing. What happens if they're not happy?
Yeah.
Now you're miserable. If you do it for them because you know it's the best thing you can do for them, then you feel way more satisfied than when you do something that's best for you or do it because you want them to do something back. And then again, like he's saying, when you do it for the right reasons, a lot of times you end up getting everything you actually need at least. But the more you try to get things, it's like sand. It just slips through your fingers.
Yeah, the harder you work for the desired result, the more it slips away. But when you It's a very tricky
it is.
balance.
Really is.
This is...
We've been a little all over the place, but this is just
okay,
so,
though.
like...
I think there's, like, so many things here. Like, honestly, we could keep coming back to these same topics because I think
Time
these
and
same
karma.
topics, they govern our everyday reality.
Pleasure is the real pleasure.
One of the things I wanted to say earlier was that
daily convenience.
a lot of the things that the Vedas talk about,
Yeah.
these are they're really the summation of what sitting there logically thinking about the nature of existence and the self ultimately culminate in.
100%. It's just logic.
And so if you read it and you're open-minded and you are logical, like you just logically try to see it for what it is. And there is a quote somewhere, I don't remember who it's by. Christ, I need to like start keeping a notebook of quotes that I But basically, it went something like, true intelligence is the ability to be able to fully entertain the entirety of an idea without accepting it as truth. Something like that. So basically, can you comprehend an entire body of knowledge to see what the full extent of its argument is without falling for the trap of accepting it just because it makes sense?
Yep.
Sort of, So I think, if we logically ask ourselves some of these questions and we see the answers that are given in not just only these scriptures, but many scriptures throughout the world, but especially in these, because they really delve into, like Prabhupada said in that quote I read, religion and philosophy have to go hand in hand, because without the philosophy, your religious stuff that you throw at people, it doesn't logically make sense. Therefore, it doesn't answer the logical questions of the nature of our existence.
Yeah.
So, that's what really attracts me to this, is that the further I go, the more questions it answers. The more questions it answers, the further I want to keep going.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
This is another bit from, again, self-realization, but this is right what we're talking about here. I'm not going to read the whole conversation. It's a very good conversation. I think it's like chapter 2. It's called Re-incarnation and Beyond. But I'm going to read a few different bits of it. So,
is that with him and Mrs. Nixon?
Mike
That's
Robinson.
chapter 1?
Mike Robinson is who he's talking to here. I think it might also be a reporter. Yeah, an interviewer for the London Broadcasting Company. Okay. He's inquiring about the soul in general. So I'm going to start after he's read some verse from the Bhagavad Gita about the soul. I'll read the verse. For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. So then Mike Robinson says, thank you very much for reading that. So can you explain to me just a bit more? If the soul is undying, does everybody's soul go to be with God when they die? Prabhupada replies, not necessarily. If one is qualified, if he qualifies himself in this life to go back home, back to Godhead, then he can go. If he does not qualify himself, then he gets another material body, and there are 8,400,000 different bodily forms. According to his desires and karma, the laws of nature give him a suitable body. It is like when a man contracts some disease and then develops that disease. Is that difficult to understand? Mike Robinson, it's very difficult to understand all of it. Srila Prabhupada, well, suppose someone has contracted smallpox. So after 7 days, he develops the symptoms. What is that period called? Mike Robinson, incubation? Srila Prabhupada, incubation. So you cannot avoid it. If you have contracted some disease, it will develop by nature's law. Similarly, during this life, you associate with various modes of material nature, and that association will decide what kind of body you are going to get in the next life. That is strictly under the laws of nature. Everyone is controlled by the laws of nature. They're completely dependent, but out of ignorance, people think that they are free. They're not free. They're imagining that they're free. Wow. But they are completely under the laws of nature. So your next birth will be decided according to your activities, sinful or pious, as the case may be. Mike Robinson, your grace. Right?
Oh my God.
Mike Robinson, your grace. Could you go back over that just for a minute?
Grace.
I know, your grace. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
After that, I guess he felt like he needed to say that. Your grace, could we just back up for a second?
It just blew my mind. Wait.
You said that nobody is free. Are you saying that if we live a good life, we in some way determine a good future for ourselves? Again, this is where the power of karma comes in. Like, yes, it can feel like, really, I did that to someone, or I made someone feel like that? Sure, but we do that in this life. We mess up sometimes, we get a little angry, like, man, I shouldn't have acted like that. Yeah. And we go back. It's already something we're familiar with. It's not fractal. An unfamiliar concept. It's just a wider concept of the same thing. It's a wider view.
We see the very real, tangible results of karma in our everyday life.
Yeah.
We just somehow disconnect it. And that's where death comes in. And death is really like an illusion that makes us forget the lives, which then further traps you in the illusion that, no, there's no way that this could be like that.
100%.
Yeah.
So are you saying that if we live a good life, we in some way determine a good future for ourselves? Srila Prabhupada. Yes. Mike Robinson. So we are free to choose what we believe to be important. Religion is important because if we believe in God and lead a good life, Srila Prabhupada, it is not a question of belief. Do not bring in this question of belief. It is law. For instance, there is a government. You may believe or not believe, but if you break the law, you will be punished by the government. Similarly, whether you believe or don't believe, there is a God. If you don't believe in God and you're independently doing whatever you like, then you'll be punished by the laws of nature. Mike Robinson, I see. Does it matter what religion you believe? Would it matter if one was a devotee of Krishna? Srila Prabhupada, it is not a question of religion. It is a question of science. This is what you were talking about. Mm-hmm. You are a spiritual being, but because you are materially conditioned, you are under the laws of material nature. So you may believe in the Christian religion, and I may believe in the Hindu religion. But that does not mean that you are going to become an old man and I am not. We're talking of the science of growing old. That is natural law. It is not that because you are a Christian, you are becoming old, or because I am Hindu, I am not becoming old. Everyone is becoming old. So similarly, all the laws of nature are applicable to everyone. Whether you believe this religion or that religion, it does not matter.
Wow.
I mean, it gets really good. He starts explaining more and more, and he starts asking more about it, but I don't want to read this whole thing because it's going to take too long. But let me jump to this other part of the same conversation. I was talking about something, what you just quoted. Mike Robinson. There's a quote here that I'd like you to comment on. I was given this literature by your people before I came, and one of the things you say here is that religion without a rational basis is just sentiment. Mm-hmm. Can you explain that? Srila Prabhupada. Most religious people say, we believe whatever. But what is the value of this belief? You may believe something which is not actually correct. For instance, some of the Christian people say, we believe that animals have no soul. That is not correct. They believe animals have no soul because they want to eat the animals, but actually, animals do have a soul. Mike Robinson. How do you know that the animal has a soul? Srila Prabhupada, you can know also. I love the way
he is the funniest dude. Anyway,
you can know also. Here is the scientific proof. The animal eats, you eat. The animal sleeps, you sleep. The animal has sex, you have sex. The animal also defends, you also defend. Then what is the difference between you and the animal? How can you say that you have a soul and the animal does not?
It's just logic.
Mike Robinson, I can see that completely. But the Christian scriptures say, don't bring in any scriptures. Prabhupada says, this is a common sense topic. Try to understand. The animal is eating, you are eating. The animal is sleeping, you are sleeping. The animal is defending, you are defending. The animal is having sex, you are having sex. The animals have children, you have children. They have a living place, you have a living place. If the animal's body is cut, there is blood. If your body is cut, there is blood. So all these similarities are there. Now, why do you deny this one similarity, the presence of the soul? That is not logical. You have studied logic? In logic, there is something called analogy. I know, you have studied logic? He's like, yeah, kind of. And he's like,
oh my God.
In logic, there is something called analogy. Analogy means drawing a conclusion by finding many points of similarity. If there are so many points of similarity between human beings and animals, why deny one similarity? That is not logic. That is science.
Joe, he is, what a powerful preacher. Holy
I know.
Heck.
And then he says, this is an important point, and I'm done after this one, but But if you, Mike Robinson says, but if you take that argument and use it the other way, Srila Prabhupada says, there is no other way. If you are not arguing on the basis of logic, then you are not rational. I'm like, dang.
Oh, wait, thanks to our old President Cheeto Dorito, fake news. No, there ain't no fake news.
Yeah.
There's one truth.
Yeah, it's rational, logic or
rational
not.
Truth.
Yeah.
You can't have it two ways.
He's like, if you are not arguing on the basis of logic, then you are not rational. Mike Robinson, yes, okay, but let's start from another hypothesis. Suppose we assume that a human being has no soul. Srila Prabhupada, then you must explain the difference between a living body and a dead body. And he did talk about this earlier in the conversation. He says, I have already explained this at the beginning. As soon as the living force, the soul, is gone from the body, even the most powerful body has no value. No one cares for it. It's thrown away. But now, if I touch your hair, there will be a fight. That is the distinction between a living body and a dead body. In a living body, the soul is there, and in a dead body, the soul is not there. As soon as the soul leaves the body has no value, it is useless. This is very simple to understand, but even the biggest so-called scientists and philosophers are too dull-headed to understand it. Modern society is in a very abominable condition. There is no man with a real brain. He went hard.
Woo! Prabhupada. I mean, you can't refute that, though, because it, What what gets me is people sit there and, oh, my dog, oh, they love me so much, or my cat.
Yeah.
And I tell this to people at work. I don't go out and I'm a vegetarian and try to beat people. I can't stand people like that. I find it so offensive to you're no different than the Bible beating or Quran beating or Bhagavad Gita beating people out there.
100%.
But at the same time, when people ask me why are you a vegetarian? A lot, there's a quick assumption, you could either say, oh, well, I'm a vegetarian because it's healthier for me, or, that's I would say the more selfish reason of being a vegetarian. You're doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your health.
Yeah.
Or whatever,
100%.
But then I tell people, well, who am I to inflict pain or suffering on another living being simply because I want to enjoy something that tastes good? When, if it's for my own very survival, I'm completely starving to death, I have no other option, would I eat meat? Yeah, I'm not a fanatic,
Yeah, if you're stuck on an island and there's literally nothing else there and you have to survive,
but
that point is just not for sense enjoyment.
Exactly, it's for, exactly.
It's for survival, and there's the difference.
If I don't have to do it, why am I going to make the choice to inflict pain and suffering on another animal or living being?
Just think we're going to make other sense enjoyment choices.
So people will sit here and I have to, I hear it at work, I hear it, everywhere, out and about.
Yeah.
Oh, my cat, oh, my dog this, my dog that, my ferret this, But then when it comes to a cow or a chicken or a pig, you don't care. But I've been into the slaughterhouses before when I worked on the ambulance. I've seen you can smell it. You can see the animals are terrified. They know what's happening. They know what's about to come.
And you're putting that in your body, even if you don't think about the flesh aspect of it. You're eating the fear, the upset, the anxiety, and you wonder why you feel anxious and upset.
Exactly. You're eating all of this crap. We have.
It's not much better than the other processed food either.
And I hate to even say this, but at the same time, it's on this principle that, okay, if all living beings are conscious beings, we are doing to the animals what Hitler and Stalin did to other human beings. You're putting people into concentration camps, you're torturing them, you're executing them, you're gassing, you're killing them by the billions of animals every year. We massacre them. If they are conscious beings and we are conscious beings, it's no different than the Holocaust. Every day is a Holocaust for the animals. Every single day. And we totally think nothing of it. We think, oh man, I'm gonna get that bacon McDouble, quarter pounder with, but you're not thinking of the pain being inflicted. And then, I would say really, and I've been telling this to people, what we're going through in America, or the world, really, the pandemic, this is an example of karma, in my opinion. The whole human race, they say coronavirus comes from the animals, right? In the meat markets. All these people are dying, but this is collective karmic reaction that karma doesn't only affect just one person, each of us individually.
True.
There's also this karma is interwoven through everything, just like space-time. Space-time is everywhere.
Yeah.
Karma is the same way. It's the fabric that weaves all of us together. So we really brought this on ourselves. The suffering, the devastation. This is a fraction of what we are putting other sentient living beings through on a daily basis.
Something I want to touch on
here. And
here.
we're killing the planet around us. That is actually the sustaining organism that we all are a part of.
Yeah. Something that I want to touch on here when we're talking about all of this too is that, the idea that, like, the Native Americans ate meat. The way in which they did it, though, is they hunted one animal. They would feed like a decent portion of them. Maybe they hunted 3 animals for the whole tribe. Whatever. They hunted just what they needed. They used everything of the, and even then, there's still some karmic reaction because you're still killing a living being. But they weren't doing this factor. They didn't have them all gathered up and just mistreating them. They treated them with respect. They said, I need you to survive. That was
they thanked them.
That was their social situation, that they didn't know how to get all the nutrients they needed without eating meat. So they were being respectful, but like, sorry, we need to eat you. Now, there's another thing that's a fad right now is this veganism. Being a vegan and getting everything you actually need for your body is actually very difficult.
Yeah.
Because you do need animal protein to most people. Maybe there's a few people that don't really, whatever, your body just happens to make whatever it is you need. But in general, you need animal protein to be healthy, to be a balanced, healthy individual. And that's why some people try to go vegan, because they do love their animals. I've known people love their animals, decide, you know what, I'm going to be a vegan, because I'm not hurting animals no more. I'm not being a part of this nonsense. Just out of nowhere, of their own accord, right? People do that. Or they hear one thing one time, they go, that makes a lot of sense. Why are we doing this? I'm out. But then, after years of doing that, if they're starting to get sickly, starting to get weak, they can't cope. What happens up happening, because they didn't know what else to do, they go back to the meat, because they're told, well, you need meat, and that's you need the animal protein, that's why you're having this problem. The milk products that we're supposed to eat from the cow, who Prabhupada likens to a mother, not because we worship the cow per se, but because
it gives us our sustenance.
It's giving milk. If you take milk from a living entity, Prabhupada says that is like your mother now. You have taken her milk.
It's a reciprocated.
She is caring for you. She's giving you nutrients from her body. And now she's like a mother to you, and you're taking care of her. Yeah. And so that is why they respect the cow, because the milk actually has all the animal proteins that we need without having to eat meat. You can prepare it as a butter. You can prepare it as a cheese. You can prepare it as a curd, as a yogurt. All these different methods to get all the different things you need. If we were living a natural enough life, we weren't pasteurizing the crap out of it and all the other things we do to milk that make it hard for us to ingest, etc. Because milk actually, at its base...
we grew up drinking raw milk from our cows.
Yeah, and when your cow got into the onion patch, it tasted like onions. It was, like...
Well, and the interesting thing about, if I may, just on this topic of... So, on most farms, right? Yeah. What do? And I grew up, we grew up in Pennsylvania out in the country. I mean, we're very familiar with, you raise your animals. Okay, we want a lot of milk, therefore we're going to breed the cows every year so that they can keep giving milk. Yeah. And then you're going to take the cows, we're going to rip the cows away from the moms, and then that way they don't cut out on the milk supply, right? And then after a few years, okay, the mom's not being productive anymore, we're going to go kill her. That's basically the cycle, right? Yeah. But our cow, Rohini, and you and many of our neighbors can attest, we got her from an Amish man. She was already 12 years old or something. I mean, she was an older cow, or 10, I think. She had one baby, and it was like a year or two before we got her. Yeah. I mean, she was still milking, hand milked. We got her, we started milking her. She milked for several years. A long time. We never had her bred. Yeah. And then she ended up drying up because we went, it's when we went to India. And,
you were gone for too long.
Gone for too long. We ended up getting another cow. Yeah. That was younger, that had just had a baby, so we could milk her. And we never killed our other cow. We treated her with love.
Yeah, you took care of her.
She was, just like a dog.
She'd given you sustenance.
She would follow us around in the woods, and she was great. And because we were milking the other cow, she kind of felt left out. Yeah. And she'd come up at milk time. So my dad started, we'd all give her grains. and a little bit of extra snack at milk time, but we wouldn't actually milk her. But then my dad one day was like, man, her milk bag is like really filling up. She wanted to reciprocate with us so much, and this is like 7 years after we had gotten her. She started milking
just out of appreciation for what you guys were taking care of her.
And we milked her for another couple of years after that.
Yeah. That's incredible.
There's no need, and it was because we treated her with
like a
love
mother.
and respect.
You were taking care of her. You were feeding her,
and she reciprocated. We never were like, oh man, she doesn't give us enough milk. We always had extra milk. We were giving it away to people.
Yeah, because you guys didn't have a fridge for years.
Oh yeah,
there was that too.
But but we had so much of it.
Yeah,
I mean, like
you did.
And there is.
That's a great story.
It
shows the reciprocation you can have with another living being.
They're conscious just because you can't.
As if that was that has to be a living. How does that happen if it's not a living being? If it's not a soul in there, like how does that? Yeah. That kind of like no child recently. I spent 7 years. You dried up for years, and now just because you want to be.
It blew my dad's mind. He's like, "What is going on right now?" She just started milking, and like, yeah.
That is so cool. I had forgotten about that, but I do remember that she was milking for a long time.
She was, yeah. Rohini, she was the best.
But. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to touch base on that because, sometimes if you start it starts to feel like bashing on people that eat meat. It's the only life they've ever known. They don't know how to get nutrients that they need. So I just wanted to present that side of it as it's not like we're lunatics out here that want to burn you at the stake if you eat meat. It's just that from our belief system, from the bhakti, from the spirit soul, we want to attempt to get the nutrients we need in another way so that we can treat all living beings with respect.
Yeah.
And
including the people that are killing other animals and eating them.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't respect only the people that are being good and not respect the people you got to respect everyone.
Well, also you have to respect people from the perspective that they're at too. Like we have learned, we have lived, we have been raised a certain way. The people we're dealing with out in the world that aren't raised the same way we are, they are dealing with people and life and the world in a way that they were raised to do. Mm. This idea that even if what we believe is right, obviously you and I kind of do, else we wouldn't still think it. We do believe that there's a lot of truth here, and that it seems like the most logical, real, and the more we read, the more we get into it.
Yeah.
But even if somehow we're, even if we're right, they also think that. Yeah. They think the same thing about their life because it's all they've known.
Yeah.
What they have right now is the best knowledge they've been able to acquire throughout their life. And they are operating based on that. Mm-hmm. Whether or not it's true. That's what all of us do as human beings. It's true until it isn't for all of us. And so I think that I just like to be careful when you and I are talking to make sure people don't feel that we are attacking anyone or dragging their name through the mud or whatever. We're not trying to shame anybody.
No, for sure.
We understand that we're speaking from an absolute perspective of this is what we believe sometimes. But it doesn't come from a place of harsh judgment. No. Or ridicule, or trying to damn you to hell, or anything crazy like that. It's just us talking about the truth that we've been given, and we want to impart it to you. And part of that is
just because
part of that is our diet. Part of that is because that is part of what we learn. That's the complete thing. The complete thing is, at some point, if you really feel this way about all living beings, you kind of can't just keep eating meat because it's sensually gratifiable for you, even if it is very sensually gratifiable. But then again. I have my own weaknesses and when my senses are concerned. You have your own weaknesses. We have things. Just because we don't eat meat doesn't make us better than someone who eats meat, but maybe has given up other things. There's so many levels to this. I just want to make sure we don't come off as judgmental or rude because, unless you are, and then the more saying that you get, the less judgmental you are anyway. But the bottom line is we have our own sensual weaknesses. We understand.
Yeah, for sure. Oh. I wanted to look up something.
Did it open?
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, let's wrap up this talk at least.
Okay.
Because I think. Fine. Oh no! What did you want? You were looking up something for this?
No.
Sorry. What were you going to look up? We can wrap up with whatever you're looking up if you want.
Oh crap! It was something. Now I'm losing the train of my thought here. It was about fault finding.
What?
Prabhupada, basically, I was trying to find where he was talking about fault finding.
Okay. Which he did say in that text I read, text 30 of chapter 9, he mentioned fault finding is not a devotional situation.
Exactly. So
he said that is not appropriate.
The pure, enlightened soul, they don't see the fault in everyone because they understand that underneath all of our layers, we're like onions, to quote Shrek. Layers.
What about a parfait? Everybody like a parfait.
No! Ogres are like onions.
Okay.
So we're all like onions, and at the center, we're the same stinky, juicy spirit soul.
Yeah.
And so when a truly enlightened person looks at everyone, they don't see our material conditioning. They see through the conditioning.
And that's what he was constitutional.
They see
constitutional position.
Yeah, they
versus
are seeing.
Conditional.
They're looking at everything from the meta perspective. They're looking at, and this is like the third eye. Like they're able to really see things as they truly are.
Yeah.
And when you're able to see things as they truly are, you're able to make connections that you otherwise may not necessarily be able to make.
I like the constitutional that he made in chapter 9.
Yeah.
Constitutional versus conditional. Because the conditional is how we were raised, how we're dealing with the world we're in, all the pressures, and constitutional is our permanent spiritual self, which is what you're talking about.
And that permanent spiritual self is, we really are ultimately our... We can talk about this next time. I wanted to talk about Paramatma.
And the Atma.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great.
Atma?
We're at an hour and like 15 minutes, so I think we should... We're just about at an hour 15 anyway, not quite, but we're getting close.
Okay. So, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Next time we can talk about the Paramatma and the Atma, which is the self and then the super self.
Yeah.
And like, what are we?
Yeah.
And what is our relationship with
the world, the existence,
the supreme
entity,
the world,
love.
Because those are very fundamental things. To really understand what you can't really know yourself unless you ask some of these deep questions.
Yep.
And anyway, it just is amazing how the hoops we jump through and how much we bend over backwards just trying to make ourselves forget what really is important. Damn. Anyway.
I mean, we're already over an hour anyway, and there's one more thing in here, and I was like thinking about reading this separately at some point, but this just ties so much into what we're doing. Maybe I'll split it in two for when we put it online. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm just going to read this little section at the bottom. So Mike Robinson is saying, but if I understand you correctly, you seem to be educating people purely on a scientific basis. Where does religion come into it? Well, actually, hold on. I'm going to read what Prabhupada said before this because it's actually really important. Srila Prabhupada, our religion is a science. When we say that a child... oh, no, one more, sorry. Mike Robinson, I see. Can I come back to a question I had from before? When we were differing a few minutes ago, you were saying, don't bring the scriptures in, just use common sense. But what part do the scriptures play in your religion? How important are they? Srila Prabhupada, our religion is a science. When we say that a child grows into a boy, it is science, it is not religion. Every child grows into a boy. What is the question of religion? Every man dies. What is the question of religion? And when a man dies, the body becomes useless. What is the question of religion? It is science. Whether you're Christian or Hindu or Muslim, when you die, your body becomes useless. This is science. When your relative dies, you cannot say, we are Christian, we believe he has not died. No, he has died. Whether you are Christian or Hindu or Muslim, he has died. So when we speak on this basis, that the body is important only as long as the soul is in the body. When the soul is not there, it is useless. This science is applicable to everyone, and we are trying to educate people on this basis. Mike Robinson, but if I understand you correctly, you seem to be educating people on a purely scientific basis. Where does religion come into it at all? Srila Prabhupada, religion also means science. People have wrongly taken religion to mean faith. I believe. Then to a devotee, someone else that was in the room with them, he says, look up the word religion in the dictionary. Disciple, the student in the room. Under religion, the dictionary says, recognition of superhuman control or power, and especially of a personal God entitled to obedience, and effecting such recognition with the proper mental attitude. Srila Prabhupada, yes. Religion means learning how to obey the supreme controller. So you may be Christian and I may be Hindu, it doesn't matter. We must both accept that there is a supreme controller. Everyone has to accept that. That is real religion. Not this we believe animals have no soul. That is not religion. That is most unscientific. Religion means scientific understanding of the supreme controller. To understand the supreme controller and obey him. That is all. In the state, the good citizen is he who understands the government and obeys the laws of the government, and the bad citizen is the one who does not care for the government. So if you become a bad citizen by ignoring God's government, then you are irreligious, and if you are a good citizen, then you are religious. Mike Robinson, I see. Can you tell me what you believe to be the meaning of life? Why do we exist in the first place? We touched on this as well. Srila Prabhupada, the meaning of life is to enjoy. But now you are on a false platform of life, and therefore you are suffering instead of enjoying. Everywhere we see the struggle for existence. Everyone is struggling, but what is their enjoyment in the end? They are simply suffering and dying. Therefore, although life means enjoyment, at the present moment, your life is not enjoyment. But if you come to the real spiritual platform of life, then you will enjoy. I'll just finish this off. We're almost at the end anyway. Mike Robinson, can you explain to me, finally, some of the stages you go through in spiritual life? What are the spiritual stages a new devotee of Krishna goes through? Srila Prabhupada, the first stage is that you are inquisitive. So you say, what is this Krishna consciousness movement? Let me study it. This is called Shraddha, or faith. This is the beginning. Then if you are serious, you mix with those who are cultivating this knowledge. You try to understand how they are feeling. Then you'll feel, why not become one of them? And when you become one of them, then all your misgivings soon go away. You become more faithful, and then you get a real taste for Krishna consciousness. Why aren't these boys going to see the cinema? Why don't they eat meat or go to the nightclub? Because their taste has changed. They hate all these things now. In this way, you make progress. First faith, then association with devotees, then removal of all misgivings, then firm faith, then taste, then God realization, and then...
Read those again real quick?
Yeah. They hate all these things now. In this way, you make progress. First, faith, then association with devotees, then removal of all misgivings, then firm faith, then taste. It means some enjoyment. We start to enjoy what we're doing. Then God realization, and then love of God, the perfection. That is first-class religion, not some ritualistic ceremony of I believe, you believe. That is not religion. That is cheating. Real religion means to develop your love for God. That is the perfection of religion. Mike Robinson, thank you very much for talking with me. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Srila Prabhupada, Hare Krishna. Woo! He's out. All right, and then we're out. Don't forget to share, like, subscribe, all those things wherever you're listening to us, podcast, YouTube, Instagram, and we'll be back another one soon. We appreciate you.
Yes. This was great, dude.